third game from this set, and this one, along with the fourth game, I thought were significantly harder than games 1 and 2. This game took me about 10.5 minutes. It's a grouping game. It's at the highest level, it's an in-out grouping game, and then within the in-group, we're playing a 1, 2, 3 group grouping game. But anyway, let's take a look at the stimulus and see how we get there. So I'm going to read the stimulus and just start jotting down these ideas and see how they coalesce, how they're supposed to sort of coalesce in our minds to form our game board. So we have 3 rugs. 3 rugs will be woven out of colored thread, right? So I read 3 rugs, okay, and then you keep reading 6 colors of thread are available, F, O, P, T, W, and Y. These 6. 3 rugs, I'm thinking rugs, that's dress-up language for groups. Of course, the colored threads are that's the dress-up language, which we translate into game pieces or items, game items. So they do immediately tell us that exactly 5 of these 6, exactly 5, of course, I'm just arbitrarily choosing these 5. 5 of these 6 will be used, right? Which means one of them will be unused. So now how does used and unused translate into logic games language, right? Used and unused. That's a binary cut, right? You're either used or you're unused. Well, binary cuts are in-out games. Right? They're in-out games. So at the highest, most abstract level, what we're doing with these 6 game pieces, we're saying, look, one of you guys is going to be out, right? Out over here, and the other 5 of you will be in, right? So this then brings up the recurring inference, right? Forget about the 3 rugs for a second. This brings up the recurring inference, right? That in grouping games, and look at this, there's only 1 slot over here. As soon as you figure out who goes into this slot, then what? Then nobody has to tell you anything. You have to immediately make the recurring inference from game to game to game that all the other items have to file in, have to fit into the only remaining group, right? Which then forces a lot of conditions to trigger, blah, blah, blah. You got to figure out their relationships, right? But this is one of those recurring inferences. I say this all the time, right? So you have to know this. So at the highest level, it's an in-out game. But then now let's think about the 3 rugs. Right? What's going on with the 3? Well, these 3 rugs are the rugs that are used, right? So this is rug number 1, rug number 2, rug number 3. And what about each of the rugs? Well, we have to figure out for each of them what colors they're threaded out of, or in other words, in games language, which items go into each of the groups, right? So let's keep reading here. It says each color that's used will be used in only one of the rugs. That's great. That just means these items are exhaustible. They're unique items. If they weren't, if like F could be repeated or all of them could be repeated, then you set this up like a chart, right? But here the items are exhaustible, so we won't do that. Just the regular grouping game board, normal grouping game board. And then we read that the rugs our groups are either solid, woven in a single color, or multicolor. See there again, solid versus multicolor. That's dress-up language. How does that language translate into grouping games language? I mean, we've seen what does it mean to be solid? It means you have one item in it, right? And you're closed out, like O, for example. You're solid, O stands for olive, right? Or you're solid peach colored, right? See, really solid just means you have a single slot. We've seen previous versions of this language of this thing getting dressed up as, this person is on solo assignment, right? That's solo, solid, right? It just means there's one slot only in this group, right? Okay, so in this language, it's solid color for this rug, right? Multicolor means more than one, right? More than one. Now you're multicolored. So when they say this, either solid or multicolor is almost redundant. I mean, like you're solid. Okay, if I go like this, right? I mean, you can't have like no colors, right? If you're either solid or multicolor, it means you're either one or you're more than one, right? Okay, so from that line, we can start thinking about the distribution of our slots. Right, we have 5 items to distribute here. Each group has to get at least one item because they're either solid. At this point, they're all solid, right? But they can't all be solid because we have 2 more, right? 2 more slots to distribute to make the 5. So they can't all be solid. So how do we distribute these 2 slots? Well, maybe you're multicolored, right? Both of these slots go into one group, in which case you're solid. Or alternatively, you're multicolored and, right, we split these 2 up. You're multicolored, okay, then you're solid, right? That's it. Those are the only 2 ways to distribute these 2 slots. Okay, so now we got the game board figured out. Let's clean this up a little bit and then take a look at our rules. Cleaned up, our game board looks like this. Our game pieces here. This 5 is to remind me that we have 5 slots, 3 of which have been distributed. The other 2, like we said, could be distributed like this or like this. I am closing this out. This is just for emphasis. You don't have to do this, but I think you should. It's for emphasis, visual emphasis, that as soon as something goes over here, right? Now I know all the rest of you guys, I have to somehow fit you into into here. All right, so our first rule reads that in any rug in which white is used, two other colors are also used. So I'm going to represent this rule, rule number 1, like this. If I see a W in our in group, remember that's what use translates to, right? This is our in group. If W is in our in group, right, as opposed to unused being out, right? Whichever subgroup that W is in, if W is here, then what? It carries two other slots with it, right? That's what this means. Now, see, if you think about it, if it carries two other slots with it, then that makes for 5, right? Then this group is closed out with 1, 2, 3, right? 4 and 5. So these other two groups are closed out. They're solo groups. They're quote unquote solid color rug groups, right? So that's if W is in. This is what this rule says. Now, W doesn't have to be in, right? Alternatively, W could be out. Now, if W is out, then what? Well, then you fail the sufficient, and this is a core lesson in logic games, the rule falls away, right? This rule just doesn't exist anymore. So that's what this rule means. Now, in this lesson, I'm going to go ahead and move on to rule number 2, but in a separate lesson on 7th stage, what we're going to do is use this rule and split our master game board up into 2 game boards to reflect the 2 possibilities we just covered, or in other words, we're going to further visually represent this rule directly onto our game board. So the point of that is really twofold. One is to remind you what you're doing, and 2 is remind you that you have choice. What do I mean by that? Well, what are we doing? They give us our rules in English, and we hate that. So what? We visually translate, right? We translate into some visual language that we like better, right? Because it speaks to us better than the English. Okay, so that's what we're doing. It's a process of visual translation. Well, if you're doing that, you have choice over when you stop. If you just stop here, that's fine, but you made a choice to stop here, right? You're choosing to represent your rules in your rule list, rule number 2, rule number 3, blah, 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 right? That's a choice. You could choose to further visually represent this rule across 2 sub-game boards. But anyway, like I said, we'll cover that in a separate lesson. Now let's move on to our next rule, which says that in any rug in which O is used, P is also used. So if O, use again meaning in group, if O is in, then O can't be alone. O has to be with P, right? So how does this work on our game board? Well, if I see O over here, then what? Then immediately P has to go with O like this, right? What's the alternative? Well, the alternative is O doesn't get to be in which case O is out, and you failed, right? You failed your sufficient condition. This rule just floats away. It just disappears, right? Okay, so now you might not have made this inference, and whether you do, I think, depends on how sensitive you are to this recurring inference that, well, recurs from game to game to game to game, right? Grouping games specifically, which is that when this group is full, everything else has to go in, right? And look, what's the group that's in danger of getting filled up? It's our out group. It only has 1 slot, right? So we said O over here is fine, whatever, right? Failed, whatever. But what if P is over here in the out group, right? What if P is over here? Okay, so you think about what this rule says. We're kicking the contrapositive. If O is in, then O has to be in with P. So if P is out, what does that mean? That means O has to be out too. But wait a second, that's a contradiction. We don't have enough space in our out group to accommodate both P and O. So what does that mean? Well, this is a guy that triggered P being out is what triggered the contradiction. So contradictions never hold. Therefore, P must always be in. Right? That's a pretty big inference. Now, if you didn't figure this inference out, it's actually okay. The second question from this set forces you to figure this inference out anyway as the right answer choice. All right, so let's keep going as if we didn't figure out this inference. Our remaining 3 rules, I'm just going to call it rule number 3 because they're all logically of the same form, right? FT can't be together, PT can't be together, PY can't be together. That just means within our in group, we're talking about within the in group. If you see an F over here, well, guess what? You don't get to see a T. If you see a T over here, well, you don't get to see an F and you don't get to see a P, right? If you see a P over here, you don't get to see a Y or vice versa. All right, so that's it. That's why I kind of want to just lump all these rules together. All right, so that's it. These are all of our rules. Let's take a look at the questions. First question, 11, standard acceptable situation question. Take your rules, eliminate. Again, I formatted it a little bit better, but you just have to learn to repass their awkward formatting. Let's take a look at rule number 1. If I see a W, W had better be with 2 other items, right? So W2 is fine. Here, W is with 1 other item. No good. E's gone. Next up, if I see an O, O had better be with a P. So here, OP is fine. OP, O, no P, no good. OP is fine. Next up, F and T can't be together. So split together, no good. PT can't be together, but that doesn't happen. PY can't be together, eliminates B, so A is right. Question 12 is a must-be true question, just straight up must be true, no additional premises. So we really have no other option but to just brute force our way down our answers. So now remember, when you have to do something like this, it could be for could be true, it could be for must be true, whatever. When you have to do something like this, you got to be strategic about how you spend your time, right? Before diving deep into answer choice A, you have to sort of take a step back, consider it, and ask yourself, am I deeply, deeply suspicious that answer choice A is the right answer? Only if the answer to that is yes, I am deeply, deeply suspicious is right, are you allowed to dive into answer choice A without having looked at any of the others, right? Because think about what you're doing. You're running the risk of having an obvious answer choice just waiting to speak to you somewhere down here, but you're not listening. You're not listening because you've dove too deep into this answer choice, right? That's a waste of time, right? Whereas if you're just like, oh, I don't know about this. Oh, I don't know about this. P must be in. Well, there's something about P over here. See, again, all this depends on your sensitivity to the rules to this game board. Right, we already explained P must be in. If I try to put P out, then what? Then the forces O to be out, right? And of course, that's not okay. We don't have two slots in our out group. Therefore, what? P must be in, which is what makes C correct. So to reiterate, what I'm saying is that you want to give yourself the opportunity to have this potentially obvious answer choice speak to you. And you give yourself that opportunity by taking a quick once-over of all the answers. Okay, so I suppose at this point we can move on, but I do want to talk about why I translated into out or solo. The answer choice itself says there are no multicolored rugs, right? There are no multicolored rugs in which F is used. So what does that mean? Well, what is a multicolored rug? Well, this is a multicolored rug, right? So they're saying you can't have F be used with anything else. Well, why not? Or I suppose before I get to why not, the logical alternatives for F being a multicolor in a multicolored rug is that it's either out, not used, right? That's not a multicolored rug, or F is solo, right? These are the two logical alternatives to F not being in a quote unquote multicolored rug. That's why I translated it to like this, right? It must be true that F is out or solo. Well, no, it could totally be true that F is used in a multicolored rug, right? W, F, I don't know, put P over here, right? So W's got two things with it, check. Go ahead and just toss O out to render this rule irrelevant. And then you just got T and Y, right? And F is not with T, check, right? P is not with T, P is not with Y, check, check, and you're all set. This is not a must be true. We just falsified it, right? So, but see, this is a waste of time, right? Because you just sort of go down to answer choice C, you're like, oh yeah, this must be right. You save yourself all this time, and then you can move on to question 13. Question 13 is a must-be true question, but here we are given an additional premise that one of the rugs is solid peach, meaning P is in and P is in alone, solo. All right, so what does that mean? Well, rule number 2 talks about P, and if P is solo, we are failing the necessary condition. No way O is going to be with P because P is solo, so if you fail necessary, contrapose back, fail the sufficient, O must be out, and this rule is contrapositively spent. Okay, so at this point, you can't just stand here paralyzed like looking at this O is placed, P is placed. Remember that recurring inference. We only have one slot in our out group and now it's full. What does that mean? That means our remaining items, all 4 of you, see, like you're not going to get an additional prompt from question 13. Like, oh, remember that recurring inference. But anyways, this is why you have to, do a lot of logic games. All 4 of you now have to go in. Okay, does that trigger anything? Well, look at the 2 rules you have remaining. Oh, hey, look at this one. If W is in, something is triggered. And guess what? W has to be in, right? Because no more room. Okay, so go ahead and put W in over here and trigger the rule. W carries 2 additional slots with it. So there's our 5, right? So this group is closed out and this one is solid also. So this rule is spent. Now, take stock of what you have left. You place W, you have FT and Y left, FT and Y. And take stock of the rules you have left. These 2 rules with a P and T and P and Y irrelevant. P is solo. You're not gonna run afoul of these 2 rules. So really, this is the only rule you have left, which says you have to split up F and T. Right. So once again, this is a recurring inference. When you're down to a 2 grouping game and you have a not both rule between the 2, like they can't be together. What does that mean? Right. That means this spot has to go to F or T, and this spot has to go to F or T. You have to split them up. And you got to put a little trade. Right, either FT like this or TF, you just have to, because there's no other way to make sure you stay consistent with this rule. So of course, the only item left now is Y, so Y has to occupy this last spot. So there's our full set of inferences, and now what must be true, they went for this one, W, Y together must be true. Question 14 is a cannot be true. Cannot be true, in other words, must be false. So you can think of this as there are 4 there are 4 answers that could be true. So what could be true? Well, they tell us additional premise that exactly 2 of our rugs are solid, meaning 2 of our groups, rug translates in groups, solid translated into just single slot. So it looks like this, which means what for this third one? Well, you get 2 like this, right? So they're saying this is our game board, right? They're saying if this is our game board, then the question is asking who could be these 2 solid colors, who could be the items that occupy the solo groups, right? So there are 4 of these, right? 4 of these are okay, and we're going to choose the one that's not okay. So how do we do this? Well, when I saw this, immediately I thought, hey, wait a second, question 13, I actually had a setup that's just like this, 2 solo. So we should look back at question 13, right? You got 2 solo over here. And who are the colors that could be solo? Well, PT is one color, right? Or you trade it up, PF, right? So either PF or PT, both of those pairs are okay for solos. So now we look back at 14 and look, PF, that's a pair, and PT, that's another pair. So already we got rid of 2 of our answers for could be trues. There are 2 more could be trues, and we're going to circle the one that's a must be false. So at this point, you kind of just have to brute force your way down and try it. Now, of course, if you didn't have what I just showed you for question 13, you got, I don't know, I think you just kind of have to brute force your way down, starting from A. But okay, let's try answer choice B. F and Y being the solo ones. Is that okay? F and Y. Well, sure. I think we can make it okay. Just put the W over here, brings the 2, right? So you satisfy this rule next, put the OP over here, this rule satisfied. And you don't even have to think about it's T, of course, but you don't even have to think about who the last item is because you're fine. You're fine because this rule is fine. F is solo. No way this is contradicted. P is not with T or Y, so these 2 rules are okay. And if you satisfied all your rules, then you're in the clear, right? Then it doesn't matter who's left over here. So anyway, this is okay. B is a could be true. All right, let's take a look at D. We got to copy our game board over, and P is solo, Y is solo. So that means this guy gets 3. Okay, so now take a look at your rules. This one triggers for me. We're contraposing it back. O and P are not going to get to be together because P is solo, so therefore O must be out, right? And if O is out, our only item in out group is full. Everybody else has to be in. Specifically, W has to be in, so it's triggered like this. And now, what's left? Well, just take stock. We got P, Y, W, O, right? P, Y, W, F, T are the 2 items that are left. So FT like this, but wait, look, now you've contradicted this rule. FT can't be together, so there you go. That's why this is the cannot be true or must be false answer. Question 15 is a could be true question with an additional premise that F and P are used together. So go ahead and write that in. F and P are together. Now, you don't know if there's another one over here, right? You don't know if it's closed or if there's another one and then it's closed, right? So just on this alone, they're asking what could be true. I'm trying to think of inferences. I really can't. So at this point, I just look at my answers. Answer choice A says there's exactly 1 solid color rug, exactly 1 solo. So what does that mean, right? Exactly. So let's say you're the exactly 1 solo. Okay, what does that mean? That means you can't be solo. All right, well, if you can't be solo, you got to add another one over here like this. So is that it? Well, sort of. But see, you got to be sensitive. Again, you just kind of got to be sensitive to this. We've placed all 5 of our slots, right? We've placed them. That means you're closed and you are closed, right? So if you close it out, for some reason visually, to me at least, this speaks louder when you close out a slot. Specifically, this gets contraposed. This gets contraposed, right? So let's do this one first, right? There's no way O and P are going to be together. I see a P over here and it's closed. See, the reason why it wasn't triggered before, if you just leave it open, it's speaking to you like, oh, maybe I can toss an O in here, right? So that's why it's not triggering. But see, you can't because they said exactly 1 solo. It means you are closed, you are closed. Okay, so now this contraposes, right? This contraposes back. O has to be out. But look, this also contraposes, right? Do you see a 3-item group? I don't, right? So failed, W has to be out too. And now we have 2 items out. That's a contradiction. This is not a could be true. Okay, so let's try again with answer choice B, W out. Is that okay? So you have to copy your game board over. F and P are in. Let's toss W out over here. This is great. This is fail sufficient. Rule goes away. Let's hurry up and just take care of this, right? Let's make sure we don't fail it. Let's put the O and P together, right? So now this rule is taken care of. And look, we're all clear. Is F going to, right? This rule is fine. F is not going to be with T. P is not going to be with T or Y. So these 2 rules are fine. So there you go. This works. Right? The other 2 items, of course, being T and Y. Question 16, last question, is a could be true except question. So 4 could be trues, must be false is the answer that we're going to bubble in. We are told initial premise that y is solid, so y is solo. I don't know. I suppose this rule doesn't matter anymore, but I can't make any other inferences. So at this point, I'm gonna brute force my way down the answers. And answer choice A, right? Answer choice A reminds me of question 15. Exactly one solid color rug, exactly one solo. Well, there's our exactly one solo, which means what about these two? Right? So again, just memory from question 15. You guys, you have to have one more. You have to have one more, right? And then you're close, and then you're close. Immediately, this triggers, right? This contraposes already. You're not going to have, W can't be in because it doesn't fit in either one. So W is out like this, which means everyone else is in. And look, OP have to occupy this spot. Okay, that's fine. But your only two items left are FT. Your only two items left are FT, which they're not allowed to be together, right? So there you go. You created a contradiction. This is why it must be false, right? So if you don't see this inference, if these cascading inferences don't trigger for you, then okay, that's fine. You'll move on past answer choice A, you'll try answer choice B, and guess what? It's a could be true, because 4 of them are could be trues. So at some point, you have to work your way back up to A, and there's no way around it. You have to realize that this is a must be false, right? Which you realize by pushing all the inferences through. Hi there, this is JY from 7Sage. I just want to say real quick that I hope you found this video helpful and that you can help us out in return too by clicking like on this video. And also, if you didn't know this, you can watch this video and all the other Logic Games videos on our site at 7sage.com. There you can interact with thousands of other 7sagers. You can ask your questions, get your questions answered, even help other students answer their questions. So hope to see you at 7sage.com.